Welcome into episode 273 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. So, the first game after the All-Star break, the Bruins no-show to Calgary. The second game after the All-Star break, they turn it right around. Bridget, I'll throw it right to you with the opening shifts. An impressive win over the Vancouver Canucks, 4-0.
Yeah, really couldn't have possibly looked more different than the first game. And talking to coach and the players after that Tuesday game, it was like, yeah, we just weren't ready. And they said, practice went fine, but for whatever reason in the game, they just had really nothing for the entire game. And then when they immediately took a penalty against Calgary, I'm like, oh no, here we go again. But then Marchand scores shorthanded immediately. And you're like, okay, this game looks like it's going to be different. It's not going to be like Tuesday. And then Zaka scores, and then you get the sense like, okay, people have their legs under them. It looks totally different. You already battle back from adversity, being on the penalty kill, scoring, and then we'll get into it more. But 2 shorthanded goals in the same game was first time this season. It does not happen very often. But yeah, all in all, just a complete 180 from Tuesday to Thursday. And even some of the players were kind of joking about it after the game. Lindholm was like, yeah, we were joking. This was our first game back, because they know it showed on Tuesday.
Yeah, so my opening shift is directly tied to those 2 shorthanded goals in the first period that put the Bruins up 2-0 and essentially set the tone for the night. Charlie Coyle, right in the middle of both, gets assists on both of them. The first one, it's Marchand puts Demko under a little bit of pressure on the forecheck. Coyle in the right spot to pick off the pass up the boards, and sets up Marchand in front. Second one, he forces the turnover in the defensive zone, kind of picks JT Miller's pocket, and then sends Danton Heinen off the other way for a great finish. And it's interesting because the Bruins penalty kill in general has not been good enough recently. Like, it has definitely slid over the last couple months in terms of percentages. But yet they've started scoring some shorthanded goals. They now have 5 in their last 15 games, which is the most in the NHL in that time. And it's like, yeah, obviously, first and foremost, you want to get your structure back in the penalty kill. You want to not take as many penalties. So those are still key areas to focus on that they have to improve. But in the meantime, if you're being aggressive and at least taking some chances and scoring some shorthanded goals, that helps offset some of it. And in the case of Thursday night, completely swung the game. That could have. Vancouver has a really good power play. You put them on a couple early ones like that. Really could have gone the other way, and instead the Bruins end up with all the momentum, and the Canucks just, you could tell like sort of all their energy was just sapped right out of the gate in the first period.
Yeah, after their third, they had 3 power plays. They had more than that, but talking about their first 3 power plays, after that third one, the Bruins were out shooting them 14-6, and they had the power play time Bruins had, and the Bruins had also scored 2 shorthanded goals. It was like complete. It just, the stats did not look good for their power play. And also, I tweeted this out, but that was Danton Heinen's second ever shorthanded goal. It's been a long time since he scored a shorthanded goal the last time. And the only other time that he did it was in 2017, October of 2017, when he was with the Bruins the first time.
And meanwhile, for Marchand, 35th of his career, which is now tied for 9th all time. He's into the top 10 in NHL history, which, we know him for a long time. He's a great shorthanded player. And obviously for years and years, it was with Bergeron as the other forward out next to him. And now this year he continues to do it with usually Coyle as his main partner now. So, just, I said before, I think he is a future Hockey Hall of Famer. And that's part of it, is that his whole career, he's been a penalty killer and been very good at it, and been, quite frankly, dangerous at it to opposing teams.
Yeah, and he's 2 points away from having a like to reaching 50 points, which would be his 11th 50-point season. And then like you look at how many 60-point seasons he's had, like, and then you go up and up from there. It's like, yeah, this guy's a Hall of Famer. However, I don't think anyone's ever catching Gretzky for the shorthanded goal.
No.
Gretzky with like 79 or something like that, and then everybody
73,
else,
yeah.
Then everybody else is it's a big jump down. And Marchand's, like you mentioned, 9th at 35, and it's like there's no way he's catching 73.
Yeah, so you guys bring up some good points off the top. I mean, Bridget, your 180 take is definitely of note, and we'll get into just kind of how they need to play going forward. The second half of the season obviously needs to be a lot closer to what they did against Vancouver than Calgary. And Scott, you mentioned the shorthanded goals. Also, you guys mentioned Danton Heinen, who again just such a high value add for the Bruins this season, entering the regular season, still not under contract. And Danton Heinen has just been a great story for them and an important contributor, especially in the bottom 6 of their lineup. And that shorthanded goal was that was a goal scorer's goal. That was a confident shot, confident puck protection, confident speed. Lot to love on that play. My opening shift is probably where we might start the majority of the podcast due to its personnel implications on the roster. But the Matt Poitras experience this season has come to an end officially. He underwent successful right shoulder surgery on February 7th, ending his season. I believe it's about a 5-month recovery time. And I guess just what's your initial reactions to that, Bridget and Scott? Because the Matt Poitras experience seems to, first of all, as we currently speak, is still very promising. But this season, in preseason, he was so eye-opening that he not only caught the attention of Bruins fans watching, he caught the attention of management because they gave him an opening night spot on the roster, and started the year off as a productive forward for them on a score sheet. And I don't know, things just kind of quickly went south, and it didn't really start with maybe his play. It kind of started with Montgomery just kind of benching him at times, more so kind of because he was young and maybe just wasn't trusted in key moments, but kind of started there, whether you agree with it or not. Then, they had some timed or scheduled scratches for him.
Yeah, like load management.
And then he goes to World Juniors and he comes back, and it just never really seemed like he got back to where he was earlier in the year. And it kind of seemed like there was a snowball effect, just objectively speaking, of like his production going down, and he was kind of offensively anemic the last month or so. And then, he's battling injuries, of course, and leads to a season-ending shoulder surgery. So I guess it's two-pronged. First, you guys, what was your reaction? How do you feel about it in general? The effect that his presence not being there this year could have on the team, and then do they try to just fill that void internally, externally at the trade deadlines? Does it change the team's approach at all in the bottom 6 this year?
Well, yeah. So I'll start with his season kind of going sideways over the last month plus, and I still have no problem with sending him to World Juniors. I know some people are going to kind of start it there and say that's when it sort of went off the rails. But to me, really, it all comes down to the injury, which was in his 3rd game back. So it's not even like he really had much ramp-up time. People might remember it happened in that Arizona game, January 9th. He threw a check, and the injury didn't actually happen on the hit itself. It happened as he fell to the ice. He kind of reached out to break his fall and just caught his shoulder awkwardly. And then, he missed a little bit of time after that, came back, played a few games, then missed the last game before the break against Philly. And, whether it was I don't think it was a smokescreen. I think Jim Montgomery legitimately thought things were trending in the right direction coming back from the break. And obviously they weren't. I can say, watching Monday's practice, there was a drill where he took a shot and then like immediately grabbed at that shoulder and kind of did the old like baseball kind of like, move it around type thing. And I was like, that clearly still bothering him. Obviously, he goes to a doctor's appointment on Tuesday, and that's when the decision gets finalized to have surgery. So I'm sure he was battling through it. I'm sure there were probably a couple re-aggravations along the way. And so I almost throw out like this whole last month and say it was the injury. Like it was the injury that caused the decline in production, probably some of the decline in minutes, maybe needing more time off. Like it's just tough. And I think for him, you get it done now. He's ready to go by July. You get pretty much a full summer of training going into training camp and preseason next year. And obviously, he's going to have to use it to, I say bulk up. I guess really what I mean is just get stronger, like get more playing strength, because I think it was evident at times that like he got banged around pretty good. And so some of that is like pure strength. And part of it is also learning how to take hits, how to avoid hits, just how to get yourself into better positions. And be able to last, a whole season, because it's a little bit of a freak injury, but there's no question like he was getting banged up even outside of that. So, I think definitely the right thing to do to get it done now. Montgomery talked about how maybe they could have tried to manage it, keep it going through the end of the season, but then he almost certainly would have needed surgery no matter what. And then if you get it done in the off season, you're talking about him not being back till November, December, and now you've had no off season training, so like that just that almost would have like cost him all of next year too, in terms of being able to develop physically.
Yeah, and he probably wouldn't have been super effective anyway trying to play through it. So it's like you're getting a diminished like 70% or 80, you know what I mean? Whatever the percentage may be, it's not 100%. And then you're also setting it back. And it's just unfortunate for him, because I remember that when he landed on the ice, and you could see him like immediately kind of like hold the shoulder area, and it looked awkward. And that was exactly a month ago. I just looked it up. It was January 9th. So, it stinks for him. His season was really like, in the beginning, it was so positive, and then things just started happening that it was like, okay, well, here's a little setback. And then obviously season-ending surgery is the ultimate setback for anyone, and especially when you're a rookie, to have that cut short, especially on a team like the Bruins who are in first place, and you're thinking, okay, I get my first taste of the Stanley Cup playoffs this year, and then that's going to have to wait. So when you're on a team like Boston, it hurts extra, because you're thinking, I want to be with the guys on this playoff run. I'm sure it's going to be painful for him, like emotionally, to just have to watch that, and not be a part of it on the ice. And all that kind of stuff factors into just kind of the emotional roller coaster that is having your season ended by injury.
Yeah, and look, I think it's definitely a net positive for him. I mean, he's gotten his feet wet in the National Hockey League. He knows now what it means to be an NHLer, and I think, to Scott, to your point, like he's going to have to, like all NHLers do, especially when you enter the league at a young age. But every summer you try to put on size and strength. But Poitras now knows exactly why that is, and I do think that some of his fragility is due to youth and immaturity physically, but it's also kind of bad luck too, like all injuries can be. So he's definitely an important part of their future, but he's not a part of their future in the next 4 months, 4 months of playoff hockey if they get that far. So where does the team go from here?
Yeah, so in the immediate short term, obviously they're sticking with as their four centers right now: Coyle, Zacha, Geeky, Boqvist. Frederick can shift over and play some center if needed to. I do wonder if that's how it stays, or if they now look at, okay, do we need another option? they have a cut, and that doesn't necessarily mean trade. That means, what do you have in Providence? Is Johnny Beecher coming back this year? Do you think he's taken steps since going down to Providence to grow his game in the ways you wanted him to? And you look at him and think, okay, he can come back up and help us at some point. Because look, I think Beecher does a lot of the things that we feel like they could use. He's good on faceoffs. Generally, he's pretty good defensively, although I think there were times that slipped this year. Has speed. He's physical. By the way, did you guys see the NHL this week readjusted all their hits stats, and guys gained some guys get multiple Bruins gained 20 plus hits for the season. It's Garnet Hathaway picked up 45 more hits. Just weird anyways. But
how did it?
Is that accidental?
How's that the case? Isn't a body check pretty basic?
Well, hits are they're pretty subjective in terms of how much contact it takes for it to be a hit. But
I would say they've never been tracked, especially because they are very random from rink to rink, which is why some teams will have a lot more hits at home than on the road, and it's well, yeah, that's because the guy scoring it at home is giving every little bump as a hit. But yeah, I guess the NHL just felt like they were so far off that they actually had to. They literally had people go through every game and retract them, which whatever. I don't know. I guess they thought that was important, but anyways, not my point. But Beecher brings some physicality. I think he's still, even being down as long as he's been fourth on the team in hits. The question is, do you trust him? Do you think he can get there this season? Georgi Merkelov's down there. Does he get another chance at some point? Right now, their first call up to fill out the roster was Anthony Richard. We'll see if we see him in game action, but he's a winger anyways, not a center. So, look at internal options if you think you might need some help, or go out on the trade market, which we already thought, they might potentially look for a center somewhere, even if it's not, your Elias Lindholm, Sean Monahan, maybe a Nick Dowd was someone I mentioned before, something like that. But yeah, I think, now knowing that you don't have Poitras, it's that's obviously one option who's played a lot of center for you this year. That's gone. So you have to decide if you think you're going to have enough, or if that needs to be supplemented from the outside.
By the way, just while you mentioned Anthony Richard, we're probably not going to talk about him too much this podcast, but someone did ask Montgomery post game about him, and he said they're hoping for him to bring speed. I guess he's a pretty fast player. But yeah, they don't really know exactly where they're slotting him in yet, it sounded like. But
I think realistically he's probably the 13th forward, and maybe he rotates in at some point. But I think that's why. I know everyone's why did they bring up Fabian Lysell? He's been on a heater too, and it's well, if you just bring a guy up to be a 13th forward and he's gonna be sitting 4 out of every 5 games,
not helpful.
Yeah.
But to that point though, whenever they call somebody up with the intention of not filling popcorn for the players in between the periods, I know I know Fabian Lysell he's a right winger. Poitras was slotted to play center, but I just feel at the end of the day, ultimately, you're down a skill player. You're down a skill forward. So I think that needs to be replaced with something, not exactly the same, but something with a similar ceiling, right? You don't want to replace Matt Poitras' season-ending injury with Jacob Lauko on the third line. It's just not. Especially when you have internal options. I always come back to this, and I understand it comes down to the players performing and building that trust in the organization. But when you have promising prospects plus opportunity, I don't like when teams waste their organizational depth. What's the point then? It'd be one thing if the Bruins were healthy and they were clicking on all cylinders, which they're playing well. But when you find out that Matt Poitras is down for the season, and combine that with Lysell playing well, I just don't see why they can't find a way to bring him up just to give him an opportunity. Kind of like what we talked about with Georgi Merkulov earlier this year, but I just don't want to see them waste their system when you have opportunity and promising prospects that seem to be deserving of a call-up soon.
Do you mean like put him on the third line instead of Lauko and like move Lauko
Yes.
back to the fourth line?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's the thing is like there is clearly space in this lineup right now for a skilled player because you can easily listen, like Oscar Steen, appreciate the hustle, but he doesn't have to be an every night player. You can easily bump Lauko down to the fourth line. Say, that gives you a fourth line of Lauko, Boqvist, Heinen, which I actually think could be pretty good. And then, put Fabian Lysell with Geeky and Frederick, or if it's Merkulov, he gets called up. Like there is room there, I think, to maybe not top six, but like certainly third line. I feel like there's, a pretty easy path towards putting someone there.
Yeah, but so this is just the sense that I get after Merkulov's like call up is that there was still a lot like defensively to work on, and we know that he's been getting better at that over time. Like that was one of his main things out of college. Like, okay, he's got to be more of a 200-foot center, and he's gotten better and better at that in Providence. But he's still not like, can he still do that at an NHL level? Like, is he ready to do that at an NHL level? And he had restricted minutes, and it just felt like there wasn't 100% faith in his ability on the defensive side. So if you're talking about him coming in and playing one of those center roles, either on the third or fourth line, I just don't see that as like, if we're talking about like who's going to be the guy there in the playoffs, like it's not Georgi Merkulov, I don't think. So like, who is it going to be? Like you kind of have to figure that out now, or look externally and target someone now, like now before the trade deadline. Who's going to be that guy in the playoffs? Because that's what you got to find out.
Yeah, and that's fair. But to your point, he didn't get, in my opinion, he didn't get a fair shake when he was up here. It was almost like
it was such a small sample size. We barely had enough to even go off of. But that tells me that they didn't trust him 100%.
But that's yes, but it's also tough to trust somebody when it's like, their first NHL action. But it's also different now because there was an element of placeholder nature to his last call up because Poitras was still around. Just he wasn't around at the time. But with his season-ending injury, it kind of changes things, right? And as far as the desire for 200-foot hockey players, I totally get that. The problem is people only talk about 200-foot hockey players sometimes when it pertains to like they're not good enough defensively. Well, the Bruins have a handful of forwards in the bottom of their lineup that aren't 200-foot hockey players because they provide no offense. Like Oscar Steen's not a 200-foot hockey player. He's okay, maybe he gets the puck out of his zone like when the 4 times it touches the stick a game. But Lauko doesn't really score, as we know. Steen doesn't score. Boqvist is like yet to really score. So, and I'm not saying that these players aren't deserving. I'm just saying they haven't earned anything as far as playoff hockey, Bridget. Right to your point, like Merkulov or Lysell could come up and they might have things to work on defensively. So did Poitras. But they can also bring offensive dynamics to them that the other players can't at all bring. So they're not 200-foot hockey players either. So I just don't like Jacob Lauko does not do he's an Energizer bunny like when he wants to be, but he doesn't do enough for me shift in and shift out to tell me, oh yeah, when the playoffs start, he's like a lock for a fourth line role. Same with Boqvist, Beecher's down in Providence. All of these guys have things to earn. I would say the only player in the bottom 6 or in that fourth line capacity right now that I think has earned a spot for sure is Danton Heinen, right? And sometimes he's in the third line role. So Geeky, Frederick, Heinen, those bottom 6 quote unquote players, they're locks. But in my opinion, there's 2 spots for sure on that fourth line that it's anybody's game. And I know Merkulov and Lysell are not probably fourth liners, obviously. So there's a plug and play nature to that. But you got to be a 200-foot hockey player to be trusted. Well, that's great, but how many guys are actually 24 hockey players in the bottom 6?
Well, I
Right.
guess the back 100, like the defensive 100 is what they care about, like first and foremost, and then they hope you can do the offensive 100 as well.
That's fair. Prioritizing defensive game first. I do agree with that, and that's a good point. I was just making a larger point about like there's a lot
I
of teams
know.
that with a
No,
lot
it
of
was
these
kind of
players.
funny because you're right. Some of them haven't scored much at all and don't like bring that element necessarily like a dangerous goal scorer or playmaker to the table.
Yeah, and by the way, like worth noting that you mentioned Heinen, can play a third line role. Heinen, Geeky, Frederick can be a really good third line, and then it comes back to solidifying your fourth line, however you want to do that. Because I don't think I'd be comfortable if it's game one of the playoffs right now. Lauko, Boqvist, Steen, honestly is like a bit of an underwhelming fourth line. Like that feels like a line that you're in the playoffs. You're maybe giving like 5 minutes of ice time to.
They got a lot of time yesterday, but that's probably because the game was
Yeah,
out of reach for a while.
yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, absolutely. Throw the minutes in a game like that. Like, save Pasternak, Marchand, rein those guys back. That's fine. But yeah, I still think that. So even if you take that approach where it's, maybe you prioritize defense, we've talked about that at the deadline, and then it's let's look for something cheaper on the fourth line. Like, I think that's fine too. But regardless, I feel like there's some solidifying to do there, whether it's legitimate third liner trying to figure that out and keep Heinen on the fourth line, or put Heinen on the third line where I think he'll be absolutely fine, and then solidify your fourth line in some way because I don't think that they're there quite yet. And now knowing that you're not going to have Poitras, like we had talked about, that was a potential third line option. Okay, that's gone. So you're an option short now. So they do have to figure out, if they think they're going to have that internally. And listen, there's not a lot of time to figure it out. We're now less than a month from the trade deadline, March 8th. So we're talking about like, Merkulov or Lysell or whatever getting a look. And it's like, well, if that's going to happen, it has to happen almost immediately. Like if you're not going to do that now, then you're not doing that after the trade deadline. Like you're not doing that the last 2 weeks of the regular season. So if that doesn't happen now, then I think they should be looking externally to solidify that group.
Yeah, and again, this is about like you don't want to sell assets that you value without knowing like you don't have those options internally, right? Like I'm not sitting here pounding the table asking for Lysell and Merkulov to be, playoff round 1, game 1 third liners. Like that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you at least have to see what you have. You have to give them an opportunity because there's openings, right? There's an opening right now with Poitras, and then there's like indirect openings with some of the other guys because they haven't solidified their places, in my opinion. So like if you decide you want to go external, that's fine. But I think you need to see what you have internally first, because if you want to go get something externally, you're going to have to give something up. Maybe it's not a player. Maybe it's, mid-round picks or something for a fourth line grinder. That's great. Or a third liner. But I just think you owe it to your organization and the players to see what you have because there's opportunity here. And if you decide to go external after that, that's fine. But you have to do your homework here. And I think it's I just think it's being responsible. I don't think it's being like, we want Lysell. Like, no, it's being a responsible, manager of people and assets. And that's, and to your point, Scott, there's not a ton of time. So yeah, I just think they should give Merkulov an extended look or give Lysell his first look, because that Merkulov first look was a joke. It was a joke. He had limited ice time and they didn't utilize him the way that they should have for the purpose of a tryout. Like if you want to see what somebody could do, give him more of a look. One of those two guys should get an opportunity. And yeah, I feel very comfortable with Dan. If Dan Heinen's in your fourth line, it's amazing how much more comfortable I feel in the team's depth if he's on their fourth line as opposed to their third line, because he is really steady.
To keep to like the internal solution conversation, before we maybe look more at some external options, like, because that's also potentially what they might have to do. But so to talk about like in the meantime, like right now, calling up someone like Lysell or Merkulov, what it also does is reward your players for what they've been doing in Providence. Maybe give them a confidence boost, like maybe give them like, specifically talking about Lysell, like maybe he gets a taste of it and all of a sudden he's energized and motivated and he starts bringing out his, a better level of his game, or, maybe working with Boston helps him learn something at a different level, what have you. But it also pushes the rest of the players that are in the lineup. Like it creates internal competition, and the more internal competition that you have at this point, you assume that it pushes players to be better and get better, so that someone like, say, Boquist or Steen, works harder to not lose that spot in the lineup. So there's a lot of reasons too, and like we mentioned already, first of all, to see what you have and see if you need to go outside and find something different. But there's a lot of reasons to do it sooner rather than later. Get a look at those guys. And I have a question for you two. Would you be surprised? Like, would it be a shock to you if at 0 point during this next month, with, like we mentioned, Poitras not coming back, they don't get a look at a few of these players, Lysell and Beecher in particular? I feel like this is the time to give, see if Beecher can handle another chance. And really, this is Lysell's opportunity as well.
It wouldn't surprise me if they don't call those guys up, honestly. I think, that there's certain things I'm sure that they want to make sure they see from them in Providence before you reward them or think they can contribute at the NHL level. And I mean, they weren't the call up right now. Anthony Richard was, and we'll see how long he stays up or whether he plays or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I'd have to say, like, there's got to be some reason why it wasn't immediately one of those guys. And I don't really think it was cap related. Technically, as of right now, they wouldn't have the cap space to call up Beecher or Lysell or Merkulov. Richard is cheaper than all of them, but they can just put Poitras on long-term IR, and then you have more cap space. So I don't really think that's a factor. But yeah, I would like to see one or two, or whatever, even some sort of rotation, right? Like maybe you call Lysell up knowing it's going to be short term because he's not quite there. But Bridget, to your point about like rewarding a guy, Lysell's been playing really well in Providence recently. But before their All-Star break, so give him a look, bring him up, reward him for his play, and then you get to, because I think honestly, I think that was probably the biggest part of the Merkulov recall, was like he deserved it, and even if they didn't think he was ready to be part of the long-term solution in Boston yet, you at least give him a look, and then you can send him back with the message of like, hey, you got a taste. Here's what worked. Here's what didn't. Here's what we need you to improve on. Like, you just saw it firsthand, now type thing.
And it's encouraging. Like, it's not like it could be a boost to someone who's, feeling maybe a little bit fatigued mentally or physically. It's like, okay, they are noticing the work that I'm putting in. It doesn't feel like it was for nothing, right? Like, being an AHL player is not easy. It's a grind, and you sometimes are like, is this ever going to pay off for me? So when you do get a taste of it, when you do get called up, it's like, okay, my work wasn't for nothing. Like, I'm getting noticed. I'm getting closer. It's just mentally encouraging to know you're on the right track.
Yeah, it is. And I was just looking up something real quick. I'm really trying to be patient too, because Fabian Lysell's only 21 years old. But I also feel like, again, like when Matt Poitras 19, I also like feel like it's like, and I'll say the word like one more time. I feel like they should definitely give him an opportunity at some point, because he's not 18 years old. And to your question, Bridget, I wouldn't say I'd be surprised if they don't, because nothing surprises me with the Bruins, but I would certainly be disappointed Like it definitely should be something that the Bruins themselves should be saying, let's see what he can do. He's 21 years old. I don't know when he's turning 22. It could be soon. It could be almost a year from now. I don't know. But I think you just have to see what you have internally. He's been playing well. If he was not playing well in Providence like he was, at times last year and earlier this year, then that's one thing. You got to earn your stripes. But it seems like he's earning the opportunity, and there's an opportunity available in Boston. So they should, I think it would be stupid not to.
And like, if you're like Sal, you look around, you see, Beecher gets an NHL chance after one professional season in Providence. Merkulov gets a look after, almost 1.5 pro seasons in Providence. Lohrei, not even a full season in Providence before he gets called up. And I know everything's different and everyone has to earn everything. Like, I get that. But Lysell, like, you could be looking at, 2 full seasons. If he doesn't get called up at some point the second half, 2 full seasons in Providence without a call up, like, I don't know. Ultimately, like, listen, you got to fight through, you got to work, you got to deal with it. Like, I don't feel too bad about it, but you do wonder, like, if that could affect him a little bit, or you would hope he's the kind of player where, okay, that gives him an extra drive going into the summer, and he says, I'm not going to make it 3 years. I'm making the Bruins next season. But I don't know, like, what if it goes the other way, where, like, now his confidence is shot or something? Like, who knows?
Was he injured at that point last? Because we know he ended the season with a concussion. The last little bit of the season, sometimes they get players in, they're like, they resting other people. Like, I feel like that'd be a slap in the face if the Bruins waited for like the last week of the season to rest other players to put him in.
Yeah, no, it would just be, again, you put him in the last week of the season while other guys are resting, he goes off. Are you going to put him in the playoffs? No, because it's like you went all year without him, right? But I just, at the end of the day, for the skill's always been there for him. We had a guest a couple of years ago that said Lysell was, he was pretty close to potentially being the highest skilled forward in his draft class. He fell for reasons, but like, his skill is there, right? It's never been a question of skill. It's always been a question, not a question, but it's always been about the hockey IQ at the highest level, and just the small details and the work ethic. So if those elements are showing now in Providence, it just seems to me that I don't understand why they wouldn't do it just for a week or two. What's the harm? Like, what's the harm? He has to go back down to Providence, or he's already there. So,
I agree. I mean, and we tend to lean this way a lot. Like, we want another look. Like, we don't have a lot of time in our lives to go watch games in Providence. So, like, we want, and by the way, that only tells you so much, because those are not NHLers that they're playing against. Like, it's a different speed. It's a different league. We just like to be able to see it ourselves. And I think pretty much a lot of the Bruins fans agree. Like, they want to see it too. Like, they want to know where this guy's at, and be able to watch him play, maybe on the third line, give you a better sense. Now, what would actually happen if he got called up? Would he actually be given enough ice time for us to see a sample size? That also remains to be, like, that also might not even happen, like we saw with Merkulov, but it would be nice. Did you guys want to go to up and down? Yes. Who's up, who's down? Or do we still have thoughts on this?
No, I definitely don't with this. I didn't know if we wanted to actually talk about anything with the game, or just go to ups and downs. But
they played last night.
A pretty big game. Top 2 teams in the NHL.
Right.
Well, but that will come up like in this naturally, I believe. So let's hit up and down. And we were talking about this. We always kind of like go over this before we start the podcast. Like, just like get a general idea. Do we have like 2 that are up, 3 that are down, whatever? And it was basically, the split is everybody was down Tuesday, and then like pretty much everyone was back up Thursday.
Yeah. One guy I'll start with specifically, though, Pavel Zacha. Now has 2 goals in 2 games since the break. Scores, finishing off a nice pass from Van Riemsdyk in Thursday's game. Also picked up an assist on the flukiest goal of the year, which the assist part of it was actually pretty nice. Like, he sets up Pastrnak for a one-time in the high slot. Pasternak's stick shatters, puck's fluttering around, the stick's 40 feet in the air. Geeky just gets a piece of it, and it goes off Demko, off Tyler Myers, and trickles over the line. But Zacha's got a 4-game point streak now. We had, again, that last game right before break, he really clicked with Van Riemsdyk and Pastrnak. They've mostly kept that line together since then. They were together again on Thursday and had another strong game. So, I think Zacha has played pretty well most of the season, but there had been a dip in offensive production there for a little bit. So definitely encouraging to see that coming back. And he's picked up in a good spot after break.
How dare you call that geeky goal a fluky goal? That was all hand-eye right there.
Well, the fact
that it was on the ground, still figured out where the puck was and got a stick on it.
The fact that it was still credited to Pastrnak until 7 a.m. this morning.
Well, but by the way,
they changed it twice last night.
They had it as geeky first, right? And then they had it as Pastrnak, then they changed it back to geeky. So they did think originally it was. And I thought when I saw one of the slowed down replays like that Nesson had immediately after, I did think he got a stick on it. And it turns out that he did. And Montgomery was joking after the game that he's a baseball player. Like, he was a baseball player, and he tells everybody that he was a baseball player. And that was probably where he got the hand-eye coordination from. But I thought it was a good goal. I give him more credit than maybe other people do, because if you watch it slow down, he sees the puck coming and he gets a stick on it. He does. And he's sitting on the ground. Like, I don't know how he did it.
Yes, but I would note it still had to hit 2 more bodies before it actually went in. Even after.
Yeah, but he knew what he was doing, is what I'm trying to say. It wasn't like it hit him in the butt and went in.
Yeah, it also looks like Charlie Coyle has at least a 5-game point streak right now. I want to see if it extends beyond his. Let me see. He's good. Coyle has a bit of a streak going here. Holy! Hold on a second. Let me forgive my my lack of speaking right now, but the list is getting longer and longer. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Coyle's got a 10-game point streak right now. Wow! So
he's actually the first person. He was actually the first person I thought of when we were talking about like who's a noticeable up. Shorthanded, he assisted on both of those goals, and those plays don't start if he's not stealing the puck and finding the open guy. Like, he anticipated both of those passes, picked the puck off, threw it to Marchand out front. Also made the steal in the neutral zone on the Heinen one, and then Heinen goes on a one-on-one / breakaway because he was able to get by Pettersson. But Coyle starts both of those plays, so he gets assists on both of those goals, and he's just such a good penalty killer. We've talked about this before, is one of his strengths that he brings to the team, and you see it, and he's such a good team player. So he's been getting rewarded, and it's been pretty obvious that his game has picked up, like you said, Brian, past 10 games, and you saw it for sure in the Vancouver game.
Yeah, and Kevin Paul Dupont, usually I have the guys that are on pace for X point stats, but in this case, Kevin Paul Dupont last night tweeted, Coyle now on pace for 72 points, which would be the most by a Bruins center since the 18-19 season, when Bergeron had 79 and Krejci had 73. So on pace to have the most points by a Bruins center in 5 years. So,
and that was one of the best teams the Bruins one of the best seasons the Bruins ever had. And then unfortunately we know what happened in the Stanley Cup playoffs, but did you guys think that was what Coyle's ceiling was this season? Like, would you have said 70-point season for him?
I thought maybe get into the 50s, push 60. He's at least 10 to 15 points ahead of where
I couldn't agree more. And I, you'll hear certain, for the most part, for the most part, everybody has been giving Charlie Coyle his just due this year. You will see the rare instance where somebody will say, well, what do you expect? He's getting all this ice time now. He's playing with passion. It's like, hold on, time out. First of all, ice time does not guarantee point production. And Charlie Coyle has the Bruins' top six has been in flux all year. There's been different combinations throughout. It's not like he's been with Pasternak and Marchand all year. He's had to adapt and adjust to different line mates. And I mean, to say he's playing the best hockey of his career is obvious. But it's especially in a city like Boston to not just meet but exceed those expectations. It's really impressive, and he's definitely he's been an up all year, and he's once again an up right now. I mean, if we had to go with a down, the whole team Tuesday, sure. I guess included in that would be Jeremy Swayman.
Yeah, I was gonna say Swayman didn't have his best game,
but that's a 1-game thing. We're not gonna crucify him for that. Derek Forbort, people aren't high on Forbort, haven't been all year. I never had high expectations for Forbort. He was always kind of a shutdown third pair D guy in the PK for me, so I never had a huge ceiling for him. But people just have been down his throat since the jump, and I guess lately he's had more reason to have not as many fans.
Yeah, I mean, Tuesday Forbort was really sloppy for sure. Again, not alone, but definitely noticed like a few really bad turnovers from him. Look, this is another like interesting story to follow because I think you have to give Forbort a chance to get his game back and build up and get his timing down, get into some sort of rhythm. I understand like the temptation of everyone's like third pairing should just be Witherspoon and Shattenkirk, and that may end up being the case, but I think you owe it to yourselves and to Forbort to like see what level he can get to. Because let's not forget, like he was actually playing pretty well earlier this season. That was a long time ago, and there's been a lot of time missed due to injury since then. But he actually had a pretty good start to the season, and I think you do and you should want to see if he can get back towards that. At least for now seems like he's over that lingering injury enough to play. So the only way to find out like what you have or what he can be for you this season is if he's playing in games. So even if he's not playing as well as Witherspoon right now, or even Shattenkirk, like you have to see what you have. I think what you have in Parker Witherspoon. Like he's pretty well established himself as like a really solid third pairing defenseman. I think you kind of know what you have in Shattenkirk. Forbort's the question there, where you have to, take a good look at what you have and decide if he's a player and a contributor for you the rest of the year, or if left side of your defense is something you have to upgrade at the deadline.
Yeah, and one of the changes between the Tuesday lineup and the Thursday lineup is that Shattenkirk played Tuesday, Witherspoon was out, and then they switched for Thursday, so Witherspoon got back in. And also, like, obviously still Mason Lohrei, I believe, is still dealing with the injury from the skate cut.
Yeah,
so that there was an update. So Mark Diver got an update from Evan Gold, the Province Bruins GM, and said he's day-to-day. He's not going to play this weekend, but fortunately, seems like it's not anything too serious or long-term.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good because, skate blades are like, it can be a small cut or a deep cut. And we saw how scary this year that can be. But yeah, I'm trying to think of who else is like a noticeable up. And I mean, like, obviously you've asked Geeky to fill another role, like playing third line center. Frederick. So I thought Frederick was a little bit quiet in the Thursday game. Not like 100%. Like, it wasn't like he had a terrible game, but he had been on a streak too, and in a stretch. Tuesday he was quiet. I don't know what you guys thought of him since the break. Like, is he at the level he was at before the break?
Well, I think. I mean, no. I mean, I think, but I think that's just the ebbs and flows of an 82-game season. I don't think it's him less capable. I just think it's you're not going to go a full 82 like unless you're David Pastrnak, and even the best players have some nights off. So I think he's probably still just getting back into it and also just managing the season. I'm not really worried about him.
No, me
I will
neither.
say, like, Frederick does seem like someone who always starts slow after a break or at the start of the season. Like, I don't really like once he gets going, he finds a groove and he plays great. But for whatever reason, it does seem like he always takes a little bit of time to get going.
Hey, sometimes we get time off and we party a little too hard. And we spend a little bit too much time on the beach drinking margaritas, but speaking from experience. But
I have an up.
Okay.
The sky is back up. It fell Tuesday.
Yeah.
Are you talking about in sports talk radio? The sky was falling.
Well, and Bruins fans, like saw so many people on Twitter who were like, like can't lose to the Flames. They're not a good team. Bruins are overrated. Like, they should have been the ones to get Elias Lindholm. They clearly need help. And it's like, oh my God, guys, like, yeah, it was an awful game, but it was the first game back from All-Star break. Like, let's calm down a little.
By the way, they played against Lindholm the next game and he was a -4.
Word to the wise.
He was a -4. They were on the ice for all 4 goals against. And that line, like with Pettersson, like something bothers me about that line. I'm not 100% sure why.
For me, Elias Lindholm playing wing bothers me. Like he's a center.
Yeah, he was added as a center.
I don't think he's ever played wing before. It's very odd.
Yeah, and also like not like that line I feel like is full of people who are like not 100%, like it's not a gritty line. Like Pettersson just went down like the wind could have blown him down the other day. Like, I don't know. Something about that line just doesn't work for me. Obviously, they have plenty of time to figure out where to put him. And by the way, Zadorov also hurt them in that game, like took some stupid penalties and stuff. So,
well, and I was going to say, in fairness, Elias Lindholm did score 2 goals in his first game with the Canucks on Tuesday. So it's not like it's been 2 games of disaster. It was 1 really good game, 1 really bad.
Yeah, I mean, words to the wise. Never put too much stock into a game, one way or the other. Like it's a long season. Obviously, you look at the overall standings. That tells a bigger story. But if you're a Bruins fan, you don't want to put too much stock into one game or the next. It's just not. We saw last year. It doesn't do you any good. And just because and that goes for the losses too, right? Like just because you lose a game isn't the sky is not falling, as Scott said.
Here's an easy up. Linus Ullmark got a shutout. And like he wasn't tested as much as he's been in other games, and the saves weren't as hard as. But let's give him credit for. I think it was his first shutout of the season.
Yeah, it was.
So we got to give him credit for that. He said.
I think I worked almost as hard as him, but nonetheless, it is a shutout.
Well, he called it like a team shutout, which is true.
Yeah.
Like that's, but he said it. He's like, yeah, it was a team shutout. Like I didn't have to work as hard as normal, but he said, but I'm not gonna lie, it always feels good to get a shutout. Like I'd be lying if I told you it wasn't nice, like to just have that. I mean, and it makes up for all the games that he played so well that he didn't get the shutout. It's like, okay, still in the stat sheet it says shutout. People forget about exactly how that came, and it's like, okay, at the end of the season, there's that shutout. Makes you feel better. Looks better on the stat sheet, whatever. He got it done. He didn't let in anything. No. And that kept the momentum in the Bruins' favor. There was no letdown, that starts with a goal in the back of the net and all of a sudden life for Vancouver. But we got to give them credit.
All right, so we got to wrap this up. Anything left for the two of you? Yes, we do have to give them credit, and thank God that you did. Thank God that you did.
Well, the funny thing about the goal, so Thatcher Demko played for Vancouver, and I'm sure everyone saw the viral clip of Swayman trying to give him a hug, and then he walks by, and someone tweeted out, I forget who it was, Thatcher Demko really needs a hug right now after giving up 4. It was kind of funny because it came full circle with the kind of diss, which was accidental, but it was well played. Thatcher Demko did look like he needed a hug.
Well, maybe you guys can be the ones to give it to him. Scott, I know you got to go, so we'll wrap this up here. Thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you on Monday. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.